As the next 3 videos, we're going to look at the research problem, reviewing the literature, and how you establish and set up hypothesis in quantitative research. So that's what you can expect. I'll tell you right now, the first 2 are the toughest. When you're a researcher or you're someone who's beginning to investigate research problems in education, and you're sitting there with no experience, coming up with the research problem, something that's realistic, something that's interesting, something that is researchable, and I'll talk about that in this video, that is always a tough hurdle. It's a high hurdle. Number 2, reviewing the literature. Once you establish your research problem, you're going to have to go out and see what's currently there. Now, what's going to happen is a couple of things. First of all, you're actually, as you see in this video, you're actually going to review the literature first, sometimes to come up with the research problem. But then once you come up with the research problem, you're going to do a more extensive review of the literature to see what's currently been done. Now, here's what will happen. One of 2 things. It's either kind of good or bad. You're going to review the literature, and you're going to find all this interesting supplemental stuff that just motivates the idea of researching your problem statement. Or you get out there and you start doing the research, and you find that studies exactly like yours have already been done. And you're thinking, oh, that's not cool, so I need to regroup. Guys, we can't replicate studies. We can replicate studies with twists and turns, as I'll explain later in this video. But we can't just completely, totally replicate a study that's already been done. And that's going to be one of the things when you submit to me your research project. I have to get on and do a thorough search of the literature to make sure it hasn't been done. So our research statement has to be researchable, and has to have something that's not been done exactly in the past. So guys, this one deals with the research problem, and step number 1 is we need to kind of look at a general area of research. Math instruction is a very general area. Math placement, very general area. Success rates, relationships between certain scores, how we improve programs. Guys, think more generally. What area of research do you think may interest you? Guys, be creative, and don't be afraid to stir up some controversy. In fact, I think good research does stir up controversy. So, step number 2, isolate a particular problem within the general area that you have chosen that could be a potential. And that's what you've got to keep in mind here. You've got to keep in mind that at this stage of the game, it's all about potential for research. You don't dig in your heels and say, okay, this is the area that I'm going to do my research in. Because you may find out that you need a little bit more flexibility. So again, it's all about potential topics for research. So guys, you get a potential general area. What do you want to know? What would you like to predict? And again, don't ever think that I'm trying to promote myself as an extensive researcher, someone with all this experience, because I'm not. I've been involved over the past 20 years in about maybe 10 or 12 research projects. So, I think I told you about my doctoral advisor who in 2002, I think he had 93 pages of so I'm not one of the big boys. But I do have some experience in this. But I remember my first research was obviously when I was doing my PhD, and I remember sitting there thinking, I just don't know what to do. I have no idea what to do. And my professor responded to me like I'm going to respond to you if you come to me with that attitude. Well, you need to get out there and search it. You need to get out there and find something. So keep in mind, there's no shortage of problems. Again, I'm not going to completely just throw you to the wolves here. When you come to me with something and it doesn't work, I'm going to help you maybe put twists and turns on it for something that will. But guys, you've got to be flexible here. You've got to come with multiple options. So, and this is the hardest part because you have limited experiences I put there, and your skill in creating this research is going to be, the skill in conducting research is typically guided by experience in research. And at this stage, you don't have that. So that's kind of where my role kicks in. Step number 2, continued. Choose a topic that truly interests you. Some of the best advice I got when I was doing my PhD was when I was thinking about a dissertation topic. One really good bit of advice I got is don't try to cure all the problems of the world. Don't try to become famous. Get a topic that's reasonable, one that's researchable. Conduct the research, get it behind you, get your degree, get the plaque on the wall, and then you're going to be free to go out and do whatever you want to do. The second best advice I actually got this from my doctoral advisor. This thing's going to get old. It's going to get old fast because this is not going to be more than likely a 10 or 12 page document. There's a chance that these research projects are going to get into the 50, 60, 70 pages. So you're going to get tired of this. So start off on a good step. I mean, this is going to be, you just need to choose a topic that you're truly interested in and you're not just going through the motions. And as I say, most researchers find this to be the most challenging part. Step number 3, sources of problems. Where should you start looking? And how do you find a research problem? Well, guys, get involved during these lectures. There are different ways that you can look at these things. Watch this lecture, for example, that I'm putting up currently. You can sit back and have a beer and just play a board game with the kids, and over here have a UK football game or Ohio State football game, or maybe a Marshall or OU game. Guys, get involved in these things. I'm giving you subtle hints throughout the entire process. Latch on to some of these subtle hints. Get involved. Get into it, as I used to tell some when I was coaching high school sports. Get motivated. Again, just think. Every time I give you something, and you're going to notice through these examples, I typically am not giving you examples that are in math education. I don't know if you've noticed that yet, and that's by design. I don't want to put something up and you're like, oh, that's cool, I'll do that. Typically, if I give you something that's an example in math education, it's already been done. So it's not going to be something that's even going to be a potential. Guys, 3 important sources to create a research problem: experience. Unfortunately, you don't have any of that. Deductions from theory. Look at what's currently believed in theory and put your spin on it. And related literature. Another thing I put there is consider non-education sources. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Step number 4, I think this is one of the ones that have guided me the most. Think about your experiences. I mean, you sit here today as a graduate student, and as a graduate student, you've had certain experiences, but you've also have experiences as a teacher. So think about it from a learning perspective. Maybe there's something that's maybe you reflect on how R has either confused or helped things in terms of learning statistics. Well, that's from a student experience. As a teacher experience, you may see the struggles that some of your students have with the graphing calculators. So, think about, your experiences not only when you were learning and how they may be applied into learning theory, but think about as a teacher things that you've encountered and things that you may have questions about. Guys, follow an intuition or a hunch. Talk to your colleagues. It's like, yeah, man, this guy's driving me insane. He wants me to come up with this research project for 6996. Is there anything you think in education that that you think is interesting that would be researchable? And they're probably going to tell you to leave them alone, go get a life. But hey, you may have some good friends that are willing to help you think some things through. The research problem. Just a couple of side notes here. Practices, and this is ironically has been shown in scientific inquiry. Practices that were based on opinion, tradition, or authority don't seem to last long. Something I did right out of grad school is I went back and looked at the different reform movements in teaching of mathematics. And I went all the way back to 1901 and looked at the very first. And unfortunately, I did this in 2002, so I don't remember much about it 12 years ago. But, you went through the new math movement in, gosh, I don't remember. I think that may have been 50s or 60s. And, some of the recent movements, the Harvard reform, how that's changed things in terms of the way that we teach statistics or teach calculus. So those things are things that I would say were based on scientific research. I think, at least in my opinion, that the new math movement back in the 50s and 60s was kind of based on opinion and authority, because it was in result to Russia launching Sputnik, and we felt like technologically we were falling way behind one of our woes at that time. So. Third bullet, federal legislation requires evidence-based education. And guys, I want to tell you, good research at the end of the day is typically a function of a very good topic. It's hard to screw up a good topic. It's equally hard to make a bad topic interesting. So guys, give this a lot of thought. You're going to be working in groups, and again, I'll talk about that in just a second. So go ahead and think about who you want to work with. Right now, I want to keep these in groups in just 2 students. So think about who you want to work with. And I think I can see some natural pairings. Jackie, Bobby, I'd say you guys are probably headed together. Shannon, Brad, and Ruth and Jessica, but I don't know. You guys, that's your choice. All right, guys. Step number 5: examine theories. Guys, you got to dive into the literature. Try to find a theory that that in the examination of the literature that interests you. And if you find something, remember, you can't replicate the study, but you can replicate a study with a little different design. So if you find something that's cool, see the way they set it up, put your spin on it, and go for it. Well, first of all, get it approved, and then go for it. Example number 1 that I want to give you. A researcher is interested in how adolescents form their academic self-concepts. Now, again, I'm trying to choose examples here that are non-mathematic education related because I don't want to think for you. I want to give you ideas outside our field, and you think about how those things can be applied. So what this person did is they looked at the current research, and they found that the current research showed a relationship between a student's academic self-concept as how it compares to a self-perception of academic accomplishments to some standard or framework. In other words, it's kind of like a normal distribution. It gives us a way of comparing a score. Like if I tell you that we have an ACT score of 28, well, you know that's pretty good because you know the standard or framework by which these scores, the distribution. But if I tell you that a third score has been developed to compete with the ACT, SAT, and the student got a score of 92, well, if you don't have a framework or some standard by which you judge that the location of that score, you have no way to compare. Well, the research in terms of academic self-concepts claims that students look at their academic accomplishments and gauge them according to the academic abilities to their classmates. I see that with my daughter. My daughter, I'm speaking of Sadie here. They're not here today, so I can talk about them. She's very, very bright, and she's done really, really well on. She's a straight A student, and she's done really well on her state exams. But her best friend is probably the brightest kid in the 5th grade. And I have reasons that I can't really talk about that lead me to that conclusion. Well, Sadie's always thinking that she's not that bright because she's hanging out with the brightest, when the fact of the matter is she's probably the 3rd or 4th best student, if you buy into the test scores, in her class. So I totally see that this may be a viable theory. So a possible hypothesis that a researcher could put on this: gifted students placed in selective homogeneous classes will have lower academic self-concepts over time than equally gifted students in mixed ability classes. Now think that one through. A homogeneous class means that you're put into a class with people of the same level, if you will. And that's kind of what Sadie's doing with her friends. She hangs out with 3 or 4 girls, and they're all pretty bright, and she just constantly compares herself to the best. Whereas if Sadie was put in more of a equally gifted, in a mixed ability class, and she compares to the standards or the academic achievements of the people around her, I think it may be different. But again, this is classic. Is that a case? Well, we don't know. It's a possible hypothesis and certainly a viable topic for scientific inquiry or research topic. Example number 2, I had to look this one up. Ericksons Theory. I remember studying it many moons ago when I was in my education classes. I guess I was in college, and I probably took Ericksons Theory in '88 or something. So it's been a day or two. But Erickson describes psychosocial development in terms of stages throughout a lifespan, each of which involves a critical issue or conflict that the person must resolve. So it's kind of like you move into a certain stage, the next stage, when there's a critical issue or conflict that you've resolved that kind of places you there. Do you buy into that? I don't know. Do I buy into it? I don't know, because I just don't know enough about this kind of stuff. But the 3rd bullet, I found that research shows that adolescents who have achieved a sense of identity are more independent and more socially competent. That's what the research shows. Research also shows, putting a little spin on that students who have committed violent acts at school report that they had feelings of alienation. Possible hypothesis: school practices exist that contribute to feelings of isolation. Is that true or false? I don't know. But it's a reasonable question that someone who is interested in this area of education may want to explore. Guys, this isn't something you guys can explore because it doesn't have to do with math education instruction or program improvement. Choosing a theory, guys, it must be testable. Keep it real. Examine your limitations. That's going to be a really important one because primarily of your time, the timetable here. Let's think through what we've got going on here. You're going to, by the end of this class, you're going to come up with your research proposal. And again, you're going to carry this out in the spring, and then the summer will be you guys writing it up and presenting your results orally and in writing. So number 2, a good theory is not only testable, it's also falsifiable. Choose a theory that can be proven wrong. A theory that explains why students fail exams. I was being kind of strange here. There were some things that came in church on Sunday that kind of made me think, nothing to do with this, but it kind of made me think about some things. But anyway, a theory that explains why students fail exams is because they are being punished for their sins is not a theory that can be proven wrong. In fact, this would be not a useful theory. Keep in mind that a theory is not proven true when we actually substantiate. So if we get p-values, we set up our hypotheses and we get p-values less than 0.05, it doesn't mean our theory has been proven true because we're dealing with a sample from a larger population. we can only use softer words like there's evidence to support the theory, and the results from our sample indicate that the theory may be plausible. So keep that in mind as you think about choosing a theory, and also keep that in mind, which you will, because I'll remind you many, many times that when you're writing up your summary, that you need to keep softer language when you interpret your results. Number 3, good theory deals with some significant phenomena or behavior that needs explanation. That's just more choose something interesting. And a good theory provides the simplest, clearest, and most plausible explanation. I always thought that to be smart, you had to complicate things. The brightest people I have worked with, the thing that I've been most impressed about them is how they can take complicated ideas and create a simple approach to the solutions. So keep that in mind. Guys, you don't want propositions that contradict one another, and I gave you kind of a goofy one there. On human separation. Related literature, guys, remember from an earlier video, these are sources that you need to be familiar with. I don't think you need to run out and get all 6. If I were you, I'd probably find one of these and just dive into it. And I don't think you have to read every single journal article because you don't have time. I'm bombarding your brains and with the 6,500 stuff in addition to this, and you're teaching and you got families and people are busy. I understand that. I've taken on too much myself this term, and about 2 weeks ago, one Monday morning, I just started flipping out like, how in the world am I going to get everything done? I got these grants going on. I'm on 3 dissertation committees. We're getting ready to get into this. I'm teaching 3 online graduate classes, on and on and on. So I had to sit down and do a spreadsheet of what I have to be doing every single hour of the day from 8, and some days even till 8 or 9 that night, to get it done. So guys, I realize we don't have a lot of free time. So choose one of these and just look at the titles. And glance down through the titles, and you see some title, something that interests you, well, read that one. Don't try to read them all, because you're just not going to be able to. Find something that interests you. Guys, things that I want you to consider when you look through the journal articles is look at replicating a study. Now, you're not going to get any prize for originality here, but replications with slight variations just add to what's been currently found, or I'm sorry, what's been found or what's being currently believed about a particular topic. Your goal may be to tweak the study, so you find something you like. You may want to tweak it a little bit. You may come up with a way that you think you can improve the study or improve the methodology, or you may simply change the population under study. I've pulled that one off before in a placement publication. Number 2, examine a question that represents the next logical step in a research problem. Something you may do there is introduce a new variable in the study. You may seek to update research findings. You may introduce a multivariate setting in a previously designed study that was proposed on a single variable investigation. So again, be creative. Think. Prepare. Non-education sources. We talked about that earlier. Something that I found really interesting. You guys. Let me go ahead and tell you some things that have happened recently that have injected their way into education. The women's movement clearly created some interesting research in education. Gender stereotyping in mathematics is one that I think is interesting, especially having 2 daughters. the role of schools in the learning of sex roles and gender differences in achievement scores and personality issues, or personality measurements, I should say. The civil rights movement obviously has injected interest into the education dynamic, looking at differences in ACT, SAT scores across race, and looking at different instruction methods that may work for potentially one race or the other. As another, violence in computer games. That's clearly a non-education source, but you could merge it into the education dynamic by looking at how it affects behavior in school. One thing that I haven't done this yet because I just don't have time, but I've always thought that if I was ever going to do something, if I was going to venture out and come up with some research, a possible topic would be this. You probably know that I love to play golf, and a couple years ago, Paul Azinger coached the Ryder Cup, and it was in Valhalla in Louisville, so it kind of drew special attention from me because it was in my home state. But you don't have to be in my home state for me to get my attention for a Ryder Cup because I love that level of competition. But anyway, he talked about this plan that he was implementing, and he didn't tell anybody about it until it was all over, and he won. He looked like a genius, so everybody wanted to know what was the plan. Well, what he had done is he had studied some techniques that is used in our military, especially with the training of Navy SEALs, and they give the Navy SEALs these personality and these different types of tests. And they lump people together with certain personality types. And there's research out there to show that people who come together in a group setting with the same with the same personality types tend to merge and kind of become one, and the group dynamic becomes stronger because of this. Now, I don't know if you buy into that or not. The military uses it. Paul Azinger claims that he did this with his golfers. And in other words, he lumped these golfers in groups of 4, and they did everything together. They went to dinner together. They sat at the same table at meetings. They played practice rounds together. There was all this inter-group dynamic. Well, anyway, ultimately, the research shows that if you can strengthen the inter-group dynamic, that the larger group becomes stronger. Kind of the weakest link syndrome. And again, Paul Azinger implemented this, and it worked. Now, was that the reason? Would they have won anyway? Who knows? So I've always thought that it would be kind of interesting to go into a class, and I would want a small class, so maybe if I could ever have it where I had 16 or 20 students, something like that, and give some sort of personality test before, and look at the people who are similar in personality, attitudes toward education, so on and so forth, and link them together and see if this actually has any academic value in the education setting. I don't know, but I think it would be really cool to examine that. Okay, so you've done all this work and you found a problem. Now what are you going to do? Well, before proposing it to me for approval, guys, you need to step back and think it through. The first thing you're going to want to do naturally is to get this thing behind you. Sorry, need a drink of coffee. Is to get this behind you, and when things are kind of nagging at us, what do we want to do? Well, we get it over with. But guys, step back, be patient, and think it through. Does your problem have significance? Will your problem make a significant contribution to theory and or practice? Will anyone care? Ultimately, you need to care, and you need to get me to buy in and get me to care. But really good research would be something that more than just within the 6996 dynamics that other people will care. And who's going to be interested in the results of your study? So these can be questions that I'm going to ultimately ask you. Number 5, could your problem lead to future research? Keep that in mind. And number 6, guys, this is the most important. Is your problem researchable? Is it a practical question that's researchable for you? Can it be attacked empirically? Empirically just means not theoretically, but empirically means we collect data and examine data. Are your data collection issues realistic? Guys, you've got at most 1 semester to carry this out. You could use the entire spring semester for data collection. And you got to think, well, what if I take a risk here and something goes wrong? Well, we're not just going to say, next summer, well, you had a bad situation here. We're just going to pass you through this 6997, 6998. Guys, that's just not going to happen. So keep it realistic in your timeline from a lot of different issues. Some questions that are irrelevant. Should my school district offer more vocational training? Well, that's way too vague. And should schools give more attention to character education? And again, that's too vague. On that note, I've come up with some. I think it's on the next screen. So a few more things. Do you have a genuine interest in the problem? Do you have the necessary research skills to carry out the research to completion? Most of the research skills in terms of design and analyzing data and things of that nature, I'm going to be working very closely with you. So we'll work together on that one. Guys, something that's going to be a major issue. In fact, I met with our IRB, which is Internal Review Board. I met with the director yesterday about human rights, the protection of subjects in studies, and I found out a lot of things that I've been doing wrong. Just about anything that you do that deals with any data that comes from a human subject has to be approved by our IRB. So, that's something that we need to get going late in this semester. But he did tell me that he would have a 1-week turnaround on approval. So keep in mind that you're likely going to be dealing with data from human subjects and confidential information. This is a time that you really need to consider privacy issues and confidentiality and things of that nature. So guys, at the end of the day, do no harm. So you'll go run through 4 examples here, and you tell me what you think. So Charles proposes to me that his problem will be, should schools include environmental education in their curriculum? So what do you think? Think I should check off on that one? Well, my response here would be research cannot answer questions of should. The question could be restated. Do students who have had a unit on environmental awareness demonstrate greater knowledge of and more positive attitudes toward environmental issues than students who have had a control unit? So Charles should probably consider control experimental design. Take a group of students, randomly select your experimental and your control group. Let your experimental group take a unit on environmental awareness, and then give some sort of test, collect some sort of measurement in the end, and compare your responses. Example number 2, Andrew says, what is the best way to teach fractions? So that's their research, or his research proposal. Guys, obviously my response, this is not reasonable. There are many, many, many possible methods for teaching fractions, and there's no way to investigate all methods. So what I would say to Andrew is come up with 2 or 3 methods that you think are plausible and viable for teaching fractions, and we'll compare success rates or final exam questions in the end. Example number 3, Marie says, is the proportion of Baptists whose souls are saved greater than the proportion of Episcopalians whose souls are saved? My response will be seriously. Example number 4. David proposes, my question is there a relationship between math aptitude scores and reading scores among students in Algebra 1? Actually, I changed the question. I said among high school students. My response is this is just too trivial. This has been studied numerous times. I don't really even know how you could put a spin on this to that you could add any additional information to this topic. It has been researched and studied ad nauseum. So, guys, you come with something that trivial, it's not going to get approved. You've got to be more creative than that. So that's probably the worst news of the entire video, right? You got to think. Guys, you got to go out here and you got to think. Think again more generally. Do I want to do placement? Do I want to do instruction? Do I want to do program improvement? Think generally, then dive into your general area and realize that you may not come up with anything. You may have to go into another general area. This is the toughest part. The lit review is the most work. Coming up with the proposal is the most challenging and oftentimes the most frustrating. So, where should you be at this point? What are the expectations? First of all, start thinking about who you want to work with. Unless you can come up with a really, really good reason that I should approve a group of more than 2 students, and I don't really think you're going to be able to present anything to me that will make me change my mind on that one. So right now, you're probably going to be working in groups of 2 students. Meet with your research partner, call them, email them. Technology makes things a lot easier today than it was, 25, 30 years ago. And try to come up with a research interest. Examine the literature. Brad, Shannon, let's say I kind of assume you guys will be working together, so I'll pick on you guys. Brad, you jump into the Journal of Math Education, and Shannon, you jump into just start sifting through Primus, and write down 5 things that you found that you may like, each of you, and then meet or set up a time that you can call each other and say, hey, I found these 5 things, and I found these 5 things, and well, where could we go from there? And what's Darbro going to approve, and what's he thinking? So just think this stuff through. Just an FYI, the Journal of Education Research is currently available in MySSU via the library link. So if you log on to MySSU, which typically has a different login. Well, I know I don't use Darbro to get into MySSU. I use something else. But when you click the library link, which will be over on the left-hand side, it's going to take you to the library login page. There you will use the information that you use to log on to the computers at school. Also, the Journal for Research in Mathematics through NCTM has been purchased, and it's in the transition of going from purchase to being available to you on the MySSU library link. So guys, be thinking about it. It's